Germans are guilty of starting the war.
Reinhard Heydrich, head of the infamous SD, the SS Secret Intelligence Agency.
Reinhard Heydrich, often termed Hitler's executioner,
he is perhaps one of the most infamous figures of the Nazi regime. Adolf Hitler will refer to him as the man with the iron heart. Others will call him the Butcher of Prague or Hitler's hangman.
Was a man whose name became synonymous with the darkest aspects of the Third Reich's reign of terror.
Chosen because of your racial quality, your ideological commitment, your competence. The Führer has tasked us with the most important of missions.
As a central figure in the Nazi regime, his role in orchestrating the Holocaust and his ruthless tactics in suppressing resistance.
His name is Reinhard Heydrich.
He's utterly ruthless, manipulative, very clever operator.
Have etched his name in the annals of history as one of the most feared and reviled individuals of the 20th century. This video delves into the life and times of Heydrich, uncovering the layers that built this infamous character. Early life and upbringing. Reinhard Tristan Eugen Heydrich was born on March 7, 1904, in the German city of Halle an der Saale. He was the son of Richard Bruno Heydrich, a composer, opera singer, and music teacher, and his wife Elisabeth Anna Maria Amalia Krantz. Heydrich's family was cultured, deeply musical, and held to a nationalist and conservative outlook, factors that would greatly influence the young Reinhard. Growing up, Heydrich was a bright and meticulous child, excelling academically. The education he received was typical of the German upper-middle class of the time, emphasizing discipline, patriotism, and a strong sense of Germanic culture. These values, instilled during his early years, played a formative role in shaping his worldview and ambitions. The blend of a privileged education and an upbringing filled with music and art may seem incongruous with the brutal figure he would later become. However, it is essential to understand that Heydrich's descent into the world of the Nazis was a product of both personal ambition and the volatile political environment of post-World War I Germany. Heydrich's early aspirations leaned towards a military career, and in 1922, at the age of 18, he joined the German Navy, Reichsmarine. This decision was driven in part by the upheavals Germany was experiencing post the Treaty of Versailles. The nation, burdened with reparations, had lost territories and was witnessing political unrest and economic hardships. A career in the military promised stability, honor, and a sense of purpose. His time in the Navy began promisingly, with Heydrich showing great aptitude and quickly climbing the ranks. However, it was also during this period that hints of his ruthlessness and ambition began to surface more overtly. He was not one to simply follow orders. He sought out opportunities and methods to excel and outshine his peers. However, his naval career was cut short due to a scandal. Engaged to 2 women simultaneously, Heydrich was charged with conduct unbecoming to an officer and a gentleman. The dismissal, which took place in 1931, was a significant blow to Heydrich's pride and ambitions. As a result, he found himself adrift during a time when Germany was undergoing significant political transformations. The rise of the Nazi Party offered new opportunities, and Heydrich, perhaps sensing a chance to rebuild his tarnished reputation, gravitated towards it. His entry into the SS, Schutzstaffel, the paramilitary organization under the Nazi Party, in 1931, marked a turning point in his life. Under the mentorship of Heinrich Himmler, Heydrich began to harness his administrative and strategic skills to shape the intelligence and security apparatus of the Nazi regime. This relationship with Himmler would prove instrumental in Heydrich's rise to power, allowing him to carve a niche for himself as a formidable and indispensable figure within the Nazi hierarchy. Rise within the Nazi Party. When Reinhard Heydrich joined the SS in 1931, the Nazi Party was rapidly gaining traction in German politics. This organization would offer him a platform to not only redeem himself after his naval disgrace, but also to fulfill his ambitions for power and influence. His association with Heinrich Himmler, the Reichsführer SS, played an instrumental role in this ascent. Recognizing Heydrich's talents for organization and intelligence work, Himmler appointed him chief of the newly established Sicherheitsdienst, SD, the intelligence service of the SS, in 1932. Under Heydrich's leadership, the SD rapidly expanded its influence. Initially created to act as the internal intelligence and security force for the Nazi Party, Heydrich's ambitions for the SD stretched far beyond these parameters. He envisioned it as the central intelligence service for the entire German Reich, superseding all other security services. In 1933, as Adolf Hitler became the Chancellor of Germany, Heydrich and Himmler were granted significant powers to purge the state apparatus of perceived enemies and to reorganize the police forces of Germany. They merged several police and intelligence agencies, centralizing power and control. This consolidation further amplified Heydrich's influence, placing him in a position to orchestrate large-scale surveillance, arrests, and purges of those deemed threats to the Nazi regime. Heydrich's tactics were not merely about gathering intelligence, they were about instilling fear. His apparatus infiltrated various organizations, keeping tabs on dissenters, communists, and perceived enemies. The atmosphere of paranoia this engendered made dissent or opposition to the Nazis increasingly perilous. Heydrich's ruthlessness became evident during this period. He was not just content with neutralizing threats, he actively sought them out, orchestrating events to further consolidate the SS and SD's power. 1934 marked a significant milestone in Heydrich's rise within the Nazi Party. During the infamous Night of the Long Knives, he played a pivotal role in the purge of SA, Sturmabteilung, leadership. The SA, an earlier and larger paramilitary organization, posed a potential threat to Hitler's control. Heydrich, collaborating closely with Himmler, provided the lists of those to be arrested and executed, firmly aligning himself with Hitler and consolidating the SS's role as the dominant paramilitary force in Germany. In 1936, Heydrich's power expanded further when Hitler decreed the unification of all German police forces under Himmler's control in the position of Chief of German Police. Naturally, Himmler placed Heydrich in charge of the security police, which included both the Gestapo, secret state police, and the Kriminalpolizei, criminal police. This move effectively merged Germany's entire security apparatus under Heydrich's control. As the 1930s progressed, Heydrich's influence was not just limited to security and intelligence, he was also pivotal in enforcing racial policy, especially against Jews. In 1938, following the assassination of a German diplomat by a Polish Jew, Heydrich ordered the retaliatory pogrom known as Kristallnacht, during which thousands of Jewish businesses, homes, and synagogues were destroyed, and tens of thousands of Jews were arrested. Architect of the Holocaust. Reinhard Heydrich's role in the systematic extermination of 6 million Jews, along with millions of other victims persecuted and murdered by the Nazi regime, is a chilling testament to his cold efficiency and unwavering commitment to the Nazis' racial ideologies. By the late 1930s, Heydrich had positioned himself at the forefront of the planning and execution of what would later be known as the Holocaust. While anti-Semitism was deeply embedded in the fabric of Nazi ideology, the move towards a comprehensive and systematic extermination of the Jews evolved over time. Initially, the Nazis sought to intimidate, impoverish, and encourage Jews to emigrate. As these measures became insufficient, and as the circumstances of the Second World War changed, so too did their approach to the Jewish question. Heydrich was instrumental in these evolutions. As the chief of the Reich Security Main Office, he was responsible for implementing policies against Jews, including their forced emigration and later, their deportation. The task was one he embraced with characteristic ruthlessness. By 1939, his teams were responsible for numerous anti-Jewish operations, culminating in the widespread violence of Kristallnacht. However, with the onset of the Second World War and the rapid German conquest of vast territories in Eastern Europe, the number of Jews under Nazi control expanded dramatically. The question of how to deal with this problem became pressing. Initial actions involved mass shootings, especially in the East, by the Einsatzgruppen, mobile killing squads under Heydrich's control. Tens of thousands of Jews, along with communists and other perceived enemies, were summarily executed in these operations. Yet mass shootings, as brutal as they were, proved inefficient for the scale of genocide the Nazis envisioned. It was Heydrich, with his penchant for organizational detail, who took the lead in seeking a more systematic solution. This push for efficiency and the sheer scale of murder would culminate in the establishment of extermination camps, designed exclusively for the rapid and systematic killing of vast populations. Heydrich and the SS. The Schutzstaffel, commonly known as the SS, began as a modest paramilitary organization tasked with providing security for Adolf Hitler and other Nazi officials. However, under the leadership of Heinrich Himmler and his most capable lieutenant, Reinhard Heydrich, it would transform into one of the most powerful and feared entities in Nazi Germany. Within this formidable structure, Heydrich would play a central role in reshaping the SS into an instrument of terror and repression. Upon joining the SS in 1931, Heydrich's talents were quickly recognized by Himmler, and the two forged a relationship that would significantly influence the trajectory of the Nazi regime. Both shared a common vision for the SS, not merely a protective guard, but an elite racial community, a vanguard of the Nazi ideology, and the spearhead of its most brutal policies. Heydrich's first major role within the SS was as the chief of the Sicherheitsdienst, SD, the intelligence arm of the SS. Here he laid the groundwork for what would become a sprawling intelligence network, monitoring not only the enemies of the Nazi state, but also potential dissent within its ranks. This organization was more than just a spy network. It was a mechanism of control. With the SD's tentacles reaching into various aspects of German life, Heydrich ensured that opposition to the Nazi regime was quickly identified and ruthlessly suppressed. As the 1930s progressed, the SS expanded its reach and power. Its original role as Hitler's bodyguard evolved as it took on more policing and security duties. This expansion was driven largely by the ambition and vision of Himmler and Heydrich. The SS not only grew in numbers, but also in its remit. It absorbed other paramilitary units, established concentration camps, and formed its own military formations, the Waffen-SS. Heydrich's influence within the SS was unparalleled. He wasn't just a subordinate to Himmler, he was a partner in many ways. Together, they transformed the SS into an entity that held immense power, running parallel to the regular German army and police. They ensured the SS's influence permeated every corner of the Reich, from managing concentration camps to administering territories in occupied Europe. A critical aspect of Heydrich's role in the SS was his command of the Einsatzgruppen, special SS task forces. Initially formed to secure newly occupied territories, these units would later become infamous for their mass shootings, particularly in the East. Under Heydrich's direction, they carried out mass exterminations, targeting Jews, communists, and other groups deemed undesirable. Their operations marked a grim prelude to the more systematic extermination processes that would follow. The Wannsee Conference and the Final Solution. The Wannsee Conference, convened on January 20, 1942, in a villa in the Berlin suburb of Wannsee, is a chilling testament to the bureaucratic nature of Nazi genocide. Orchestrated by Reinhard Heydrich, this seemingly mundane meeting of high-ranking officials would lay out the blueprint for one of the most extensive and methodical extermination campaigns in history, the final solution to the Jewish question. The conference was not the genesis of the idea to exterminate the Jews. By January 1942, hundreds of thousands had already been killed, primarily in the East by the Einsatzgruppen. However, the growing challenges of the war and the expanding territories under Nazi control led to the need for a more coordinated, efficient, and large-scale solution to what the Nazis termed the Jewish question. Heydrich, as the chief of the Reich Security Main Office, was designated by Hermann Göring in July 1941 to devise a comprehensive plan for the final solution. The Wannsee Conference was Heydrich's response. He gathered representatives from various ministries and SS departments not to debate whether the Jews should be exterminated, but to discuss how best to achieve this goal and to ensure the cooperation of all relevant governmental departments. The participants at the meeting included high-ranking officials from the Reich Chancellery, the Ministries of Justice, the Interior, and the occupied Eastern Territories, among others. The meeting's minutes, recorded by Adolf Eichmann, provide a chilling insight into the bureaucratic detachment with which the extermination was planned. Heydrich spoke of 11 million Jews in Europe who would fall under this plan, not just those already in areas controlled by the Reich, but also in neutral and even unoccupied countries. He detailed the current efforts of extermination through labor in the East and went on to discuss the establishment and expansion of extermination camps in occupied Poland. A significant aspect of the conference was the discussion of the Mischlinge, or mixed-race Jews, and the challenges surrounding their classification and eventual fate. The attendees also deliberated on individuals in mixed marriages and the evacuation of Jews over 65 years old. The meticulous attention to categorization and detail underscores the thoroughness with which the Nazis approached the planned genocide. While the conference itself lasted only a few hours, its implications were monumental. It marked a decisive shift from the chaotic, often regional exterminations to a centrally coordinated and organized system of death camps. These camps, with their gas chambers and crematoria, were built for the sole purpose of killing on an industrial scale. Governance in Prague and the Czech lands. In September 1941, Reinhard Heydrich was appointed the Deputy Reich Protector of Bohemia and Moravia, the present-day Czech Republic. This move shifted Heydrich's role from being primarily an architect of internal security and genocide to a direct governor of an occupied territory. His governance in Prague and the broader Czech lands would further solidify his reputation as one of the most ruthless administrators in the Nazi regime. Upon his arrival in Prague, Heydrich was faced with a region that was crucial to the German war effort due to its industrial capacity, but was also rife with resistance and dissent against Nazi occupation. The Czech lands had witnessed passive resistance, strikes, and even acts of sabotage against the Nazi war machine. Heydrich's mandate was clear: to crush all forms of resistance and ensure the region's productivity was fully harnessed for the German war effort. Heydrich approached this challenge with his characteristic blend of cunning, brutality, and administrative efficiency. Almost immediately, he initiated a campaign of terror. Within days of his appointment, hundreds of members of the Czech resistance and intelligentsia were arrested. Many faced execution or were sent to concentration camps. This swift and brutal response sent a clear message to the Czech population: resistance would be met with overwhelming force. But Heydrich's strategy was not based solely on terror. Understanding the need for a multifaceted approach, he combined repression with measures designed to co-opt the Czech population. He implemented policies aimed at improving living standards for the average Czech worker, increasing wages, and providing additional rations. He believed that by pacifying the Czech working class and ensuring their basic needs were met, he could dampen the incentives for resistance. Another significant aspect of Heydrich's governance was his efforts to exploit divisions within Czech society. He sought to widen the rift between the Czechs and the ethnic German population in the region, known as the Sudeten Germans. By favoring the Sudeten Germans in administrative positions and providing them with better rations and privileges, Heydrich aimed to create a loyal buffer population that could assist in the suppression of any Czech nationalist aspirations. To further secure his grip on the region, Heydrich took steps to dismantle potential power bases that could challenge Nazi rule. He targeted the Czech army and police, purging them of perceived disloyal elements and integrating them more closely into the Nazi security apparatus. In doing so, he ensured that these entities, which could have been focal points for resistance, became tools of Nazi oppression instead. Operation Anthropoid, the assassination attempt. Operation Anthropoid stands as a poignant chapter in the annals of World War II resistance efforts, culminating in the assassination of one of the Third Reich's most formidable figures, Reinhard Heydrich. Orchestrated by the Czechoslovak government in exile in London, this audacious plan aimed to eliminate Heydrich, a symbol of Nazi repression, and kindle a broader resistance within the occupied Czech lands. The operation's origins can be traced back to 1941, when the Czechoslovak government in exile, led by President Edvard Beneš, sought to prove to its allies that the Czech resistance was active and valuable. A successful strike against a high-ranking Nazi official would underscore this point, and Heydrich, given his role in Prague, was the prime target. Two soldiers, Jan Kubis and Josef Gabčík, both Czechoslovaks trained by the British Special Operations Executive, SOE, were chosen for this perilous mission. After intensive preparations, they were parachuted, along with other operatives, into Czechoslovakia in December 1941. The initial stages of the operation were fraught with challenges. The agents faced difficulties in establishing contact with local resistance groups and had to navigate a landscape of suspicion and potential betrayal. The complexities of the mission were further compounded by the near-omnipresent surveillance apparatus established by Heydrich in the Czech lands. However, by late May 1942, the team had finalized their plan. Heydrich, often traveling without an extensive escort and following predictable routes, presented a window of opportunity. The chosen location for the assassination was in the Prague suburb of Holešovice, on a sharp bend where the vehicle would have to slow down. On the morning of May 27, 1942, as Heydrich's open-top Mercedes approached the bend, Gabčík stepped in front, attempting to open fire with a submachine gun. Fatefully, the weapon jammed. In the brief moment of confusion that followed, Kubis hurled a modified anti-tank grenade at the car. The explosion severely wounded Heydrich, embedding shrapnel and fabric into his body, though he initially appeared to have survived the assassination attempt. Kubis and Gabčík, along with their collaborators, went into hiding, utilizing a network of safe houses and sympathetic individuals. The initial aftermath of the attack saw a frenzied manhunt by the Nazis as they scrambled to apprehend those responsible. Heydrich was rushed to a hospital where, despite receiving medical attention, his condition rapidly deteriorated. On June 4, 1942, Reinhard Heydrich succumbed to his injuries. The official cause of death was cited as septicemia, resulting from the shrapnel and debris from the explosion. Heydrich's legacy in the Nazi hierarchy. Reinhard Heydrich's untimely death in 1942 left a void in the Nazi leadership that was palpable. His influence, ruthlessness, and unmatched organizational acumen had made him one of the most powerful men in the Third Reich, leading many to speculate on the heights he might have reached had he lived longer. But even in his absence, the shadow Heydrich cast on the Nazi hierarchy and the broader trajectory of the Second World War was profound. Heydrich's work in structuring the SS, Gestapo, and SD created a blueprint for state-sponsored terror that outlived him. These organizations continued to operate with the efficiency and ruthlessness he had instilled, ensuring that his methods of surveillance, repression, and extermination persisted until the very end of the war. The networks he established, the tactics he developed, and the personnel he trained ensured a lasting and macabre legacy. The Wannsee Conference, perhaps one of Heydrich's most infamous contributions, set in motion the final solution months before his death. After his assassination, the extermination plan was executed with relentless fervor. The death camps, which operated at their peak between 1942 and 1944, can be seen as a direct continuation of Heydrich's vision for a Europe free of Jews. In the immediate aftermath of his death, the void Heydrich left in the Nazi hierarchy was felt acutely. Heinrich Himmler, who had relied heavily on Heydrich's capabilities, found it challenging to replace him. Several individuals took over parts of Heydrich's vast portfolio of responsibilities, but none wielded the same combined influence or elicited the same level of fear. His death also marked a psychological blow to the Nazi leadership. If a figure as powerful as Heydrich could be targeted and killed, it raised questions about the vulnerability of others. However, it was not just within the Nazi regime that Heydrich's legacy was felt. His assassination also had significant implications for how the Nazis dealt with occupied territories. The brutal reprisals that followed his death, particularly the destruction of Lidice and Ležáky, set a precedent. Resistance actions in other occupied regions were met with similarly disproportionate retaliations, with entire communities being held accountable for the actions of a few. This strategy, which aimed to deter resistance through collective punishment, was a grim extension of Heydrich's ethos of repression. In the broader narrative of World War II and the Holocaust, Heydrich's legacy is one of architecting state mechanisms for terror and genocide. He epitomized the fusion of ideological zealotry with bureaucratic efficiency. While other Nazi leaders like Hitler, Himmler, or Goebbels are often more prominently remembered, Heydrich's role in shaping the instruments of Nazi terror makes him one of the central figures of the Third Reich. Beyond the immediate events of World War II, Heydrich's legacy also played a role in post-war memory and reconciliation. He became emblematic of the banality of evil, illustrating how individuals with seemingly ordinary backgrounds could commit extraordinary atrocities. His life and career were dissected in numerous post-war trials, histories, and analyses, serving as a case study in the depths to which humanity can sink when consumed by hatred and ambition. Repercussions and retaliation. The aftermath of his death. The assassination of Reinhard Heydrich in 1942 sent shockwaves through the highest echelons of the Nazi regime. This act of resistance, orchestrated against one of Hitler's most trusted and capable lieutenants, was met with a fury that showcased the lengths the Nazis would go to avenge their own and suppress dissent. Heydrich's death was a significant blow to the Nazi leadership. His unparalleled abilities in intelligence, organization, and ruthless implementation of Nazi policies made his loss deeply felt by Hitler, Himmler, and other top officials. He was posthumously awarded high Nazi honors, and his funeral was a grand affair attended by the regime's top brass. Hitler, although devastated by the loss, saw in Heydrich's death an opportunity to deliver a clear message about the costs of defiance. The immediate retaliation was swift and brutal. A state of martial law was declared in Bohemia and Moravia. Thousands were arrested in widespread dragnets, with many being tortured to extract information about the assassins and their networks. Communities perceived as harboring or aiding resistance members were subjected to stringent reprisals. The most notorious of these reprisals was the obliteration of the villages of Heydrich and Lezaki. Based on dubious intelligence linking the villages to the assassins, the Nazis chose to make an example of them. The male inhabitants were summarily executed, while women were sent to concentration camps. The children, after a selection, were either killed or subjected to Germanization processes. The villages themselves were razed to the ground, with the Nazis intending to erase their very existence from memory. This act of barbarity was widely publicized by the Nazis as a stark warning to other occupied territories. The broader repercussions extended beyond the immediate violence. The Czech lands experienced intensified Germanization efforts. The Nazis sought to stamp out Czech culture, history, and identity as part of their long-term plan for the region. Schools, cultural institutions, and media underwent a rigorous process of Nazification, and any vestiges of resistance or national pride were ruthlessly suppressed. Internationally, the assassination and its aftermath had a considerable impact. While the brutality of the Nazi retaliation drew widespread condemnation, the successful elimination of a high-ranking Nazi official also inspired resistance movements in other occupied territories. Heydrich's death demonstrated that the Nazi leadership was not invincible.